Welcome to Meander, ladies and gentlemen. If you're interested in living in Japan for a longer duration than tourism, a working holiday may be for you. In fact, I would say it's one of Japan's best kept visa secrets. I didn't even know they did a working holiday visa, despite me wanting to go to Japan for some time. They don't seem to advertise it as much as some other countries might do. So for example, in the UK, I see, come to Australia on a working holiday visa, come to New Zealand on a working holiday visa. It didn't strike me at the time that Japan does a working holiday visa as well. But yeah, the working holiday visa Japan is a great chance to live freely in Japan without the pressure of relying on a particular activity tied to that visa. For example, a studying visa, of course you're going to have to study and you can't stop that, otherwise your visa is going to be revoked. And the same thing for working, you need to continue working. So I would say this visa is pretty much true freedom with the appropriate savings, of course. So I've been in Japan now for 6 months and it's been a ride. I feel blessed every day that I get to be here, and for an outsider, there is a certain simplicity to life here. It's safe, it works, it's comfortable, maybe too comfortable. If you are from, say, a less safe region of the world, you no longer have to be on guard here. Of course, there are issues, but being at peace with your health and safety is something that Japan excels in and can't be taken for granted. So the purpose of this video is to just share some observations and talk about some things you might need to consider about being in Japan on the working holiday visa. We're going to touch on things such as share houses, rent, food, all very briefly. This is just to get a nice overview about what being here will entail. So hopefully this provides some value to you. Let's get into the first point. First and foremost, to get yourself over here, there are a few documents to prepare and some criteria to meet, depending on the country. So for example, you will be required to have a certain amount of savings, which can be found on the embassy page for your country. For example, for the UK, it's 2,500 in cleared funds or £1,500 with a return ticket. This leads nicely into money in Japan. In my experience as an outsider from an expensive country and getting more so day by day, Japan is cheap. Cheap in the ways that matter. Rent, food, not always food, but I'll get to that, and healthcare for the first year anyway. Just to demonstrate a price difference, I bought Pokemon Violet on the day it came out and it was £20 cheaper in Japan. £20. So I'll mention some ways Japan can be cheaper. I think it would be good to touch on those ways in a bit more detail. So I first mentioned rent. Rent. 5 minutes from Ikebukuro, 15 minutes from Shibuya, you can rent for 40,000 yen. I'll put the currency conversion on the screen. Bearing in mind, this assumes a share house, since it's difficult to rent an apartment on a 1-year visa. It's difficult to rent an apartment even if you have a working visa from what I hear. But anyway, besides the point. Regardless, this 40,000 yen is similar for a single room in the West. But when I tell you the share houses here are 10 times more convenient, 10 times cleaner, and most importantly, often designed with being a share house in mind. Larger share houses specifically can feature study rooms, gyms, terraces, barbecue places, music rooms, theatre rooms, whatever you can think of. That's a far cry from just a small house converted into a share house. And there are those here. So the smaller share houses are usually just old Japanese houses, lightly converted. So the walls are thin. There's one small kitchen where sometimes up to 20 people can share it, but it does come with its own advantages, which I'll mention shortly. So that was rent. Just to go a bit more into the share house situation here, we'll touch on that briefly. The thing to think about with living arrangements is the kind of experience you want in Japan. So put bluntly, think about the foreigner to Japanese ratio. If you want to have a social experience, a high foreigner to Japanese ratio is good. If you want to keep to yourself and focus on other aspects of your stay in a majority Japanese share house. I can explain why this pattern emerges another time. And of course, this is not always going to be the case. This has just been in my experience. And of course, both have their pros and cons. So for example, with the Japanese share house, say you're working, maybe you just want to keep to yourself more, you want to focus on your craft, you don't want to be distracted. That's going to be a great place to live. For the larger share house with a higher foreigner to Japanese ratio, you're going to be conversing more probably, because there's going to be people there with your native tongue. So as briefly mentioned, the share house size matters. There are small, medium, and large share houses, and I've been fortunate to experience them all. And again, the choice depends on the preference. I found even though a large share house is more festive and tends to have better facilities, I think I might prefer the smaller to medium share houses where I can make more intimate relationships. I mean, this could just be due to my lack of social skills, to be honest, but like I said, this is why your preference and experience you want matters, because what you can do in different environments matter. So moving on to the second aspect I mentioned, when it comes to food, the strange thing is preparing food at home is cheaper, but only just. Eating out is not like the West. Meals are often around 1,000 yen, give or take 200 yen. This is like half the price of eating out in the UK, which is amazing. So people do end up just eating out because when buying all the ingredients, the price can come to a similar level anyway. This is assuming some decent level of production. By production, I mean some decent level of cooking ability. Overall though, of course, eating at home is healthier because in Japan, in my limited experience, it is kind of a high fat, high salt, low calorie diet, which might seem a bit strange at first. It definitely did to me. But for example, you can eat 500 yen gyudon or tonkatsu every day, which are featured at the fast food chains here like Matsuya and Sukiya, and you will save money, but your health will suffer. So tonkatsu, for example, is just pork cutlet with some rice and cabbage. So high fat, high salt. Protein is kind of there with the pork, but it's not exactly a healthy source of protein. But that's a nice segue into healthcare. Expect to pay a small sum monthly to be covered with Japan's healthcare. Not much to say here. You're only here for a year on a working holiday visa. So you have no medical history here. The insurance is low. And from what I see, the insurance is mandatory. Anyway, these are just brief looks at the things you have to consider being in Japan. And I may explore them in further detail at a later date. But to hopefully provide a bit more value in this video, I want to impart some learnings which I've only experienced being here. So if you do decide to go for the working holiday visa Japan, listen closely. So I've said how this is the ultimate way to experience Japan. That does come with a caveat, however. Japan is not kind to situations that are out of the norm, so expect dealings with anything official to be just that bit more complicated. As a specific example, you've probably already seen when you get to Japan, you need to register an address. Great, we can do that. Just that alone can be a bit of a chore if you don't know Japanese though. But that's fine, just get it done and we no longer need to worry about it. Wrong. To a degree. If you are thinking along my lines and you wanted to come and live in different cities, which is, even encouraged in the working holiday application process, say, moving 1, 3, 5 months at a time, you have to deregister and register your address every time. So if you move out 4 times during your time here, that's a minimum of 8 trips to various ward offices. I know it doesn't seem like too much of a bother, but I want to emphasize, if you don't know Japanese, navigating the ward office 8 times can be a headache. Because, as mentioned, you are out of the norm. It's not normal to be moving so many times. Actually, your resident card can only fit maybe 3 addresses on. Sometimes the ward office won't even register you if your stay is too short. You'll often be asked to explain why you're moving out as well. But you'll learn the ways when you try and do it for yourself. So, side note, you will have to deregister and register your health insurance each time too. So that's another layer onto that. I can talk about this a bit more in detail at some other point if you like. Be ready for some unfortunate, let's say, roadblocks or loops when getting set up in Japan. So, for example, you might want to apply for a job. To apply for a job, you're going to need a phone number for them to contact you. But you need a payment method to pay for that bill. So you want to make a card because the company you are looking at only takes Japanese cards. Say you're using, AU or Docomo. It turns out you need a phone number for that card, and to get a phone number, you need a phone number for the application. I'm confusing myself here because this is the loop. Let's do that again. You want to make the card because the company you are looking at only takes Japanese cards. It turns out you need a phone number as part of the application for that card. But to get a phone number, you need a phone number for that phone number application. And your address needs to be registered on your residence card. But your ward won't register you because you accidentally said you would stay 2 weeks in Tokyo and move on to Sapporo. In essence, you will have to do things in the right order, adjust your responses, and seek out foreigner-friendly companies to get started. So, bonus point here, if you save up a decent amount, you can really make it last here with some decent budgeting and research skills. Take the financial pressure off by looking into things like seishin kippu, overnight buses, and cooking at home. You can really extract a lot of value out of your money here if your goal is to just enjoy living, traveling, and seeing things simply. Of course, you can work here too. If you don't want to teach English to kids, get your Japanese up and past N5 level. So you can do part-time jobs like kitchen support, cleaning, what else is there? Road maintenance, people. There's different jobs available out there which are low stress, a low time way to boost your income. So this will allow you to experience life outside of teaching. But obviously there's nothing wrong with English teaching if you want to do that route as well. Just a self-reflection on the back of jobs. I wish I learned more Japanese before I left, or at least took it more seriously in my first few months here. I would have had more opportunities in terms of part-time work and more confidence to try things that I thought I couldn't get through without the language ability. It's pretty difficult to think, I actually spend a little too much. I need to work part-time, and realize you need to scramble on learning Japanese because many opportunities for part-time or M4 or above. I hope this shed some light into the trials you may be facing during your time here on the visa. I want to emphasize the feeling of contentment you can get here beats all issues you may face. Everyone experiences the environment around them differently, so you may not find this, but you will find something for you on a working holiday in Japan. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Keep meandering.